Hi folks, I want to talk to you about our newest product, the Turbo Scraper. As you can see, it's a very different looking product to our previous discs. So first of all, I'll just talk about the reasons for why we developed this disc and explain the difference between our most popular disc being the Turbo Plane, the Industrial Cutter, both of which are very good, very smooth, very controllable tools. But if anything, we've had some people say that they feel they're too aggressive for doing really fine work, and a lot of people have been using instead bird discs, these type of tools. While these are very easy to use, I'm particularly not a fan of them, mainly because of the way that they cut. They tend to scratch the wood and leave although they shape very smoothly and easily, they tend to scratch the wood and tear the fibres, meaning that you have to then either use finer and finer bird discs and then go down to your sanding. So a good tool should cut the wood. And so we were looking at different ways that we could do a tool that would do a similar job in terms of performance, in that they should be smooth, controllable, not want to dig in, but give a finer finish. And so we came across, the scraper tool. Most of you will be familiar with the scraper tool and how it works. It's on a negative angle. You push it on an oblique angle to get the best effect, and you can see it makes these shavings and leaves the wood in a very fine finish. And I thought it'd be really nice if we could do something like that. We did quite a lot of different prototypes, but we eventually came up with this particular shape with carbide teeth. It's got little carbide teeth here, and they're set at a negative angle. Much like the scraper, you always use it at a negative angle and preferably on an angle as you scrape. So we recreated that sort of profile, and we put it onto a disc. This is a drop forged aluminium disc, very strong, and set it so that it would ride on these surfaces here and attack the wood in much the same way as a scraper. Being a negative angle, it's always pushing out so that you don't have any chance of it digging in, but the way that it cuts the wood is exactly the same as a scraper. In fact, I should get shavings very similar to that when I attach it to an angle grinder. Now you see it produces an extremely fine finish, and the shavings, these are the shavings that came off. So this is very different to the dust that comes off when you're using a bird disc. This comes off very fine breathable dust. This comes off as shavings which float to the floor, and you can see they're littered all over here. As I said, while the bird disc tends to scratch the wood, it is very controllable and easy to use, and so that's what we tried to duplicate with this scraper, but to get the nice cutting action that I've just shown you. So let me just show you just how controllable it is. This blade is working at a negative angle, and the shape of the blade is such that when it's spinning you can see right through it, so you can see the cutting surface as you're going, and so that allows me to do a lot of finer cuts that I could not do with the Turbo Plane. Because this is on a negative angle doing the scraping action, I can do some very fine cutting. For instance, on here you'll see there's some writing on here and little ripples from the planing of this piece of wood. The price of the piece of wood, $17, can you believe it? Anyhow, what I can do is, when this is spinning, I can see through it, and I can just take that off with the finest possible cut. I just left that little bit there for you to see, but you can see the finish that you get is beautiful straight off the tool. So when the blade is spinning, you can see through the blade, and you can see just as you take off a surface, and this allows you to do some very fine cuts, leaving a beautiful finish. And so this blade is more of a finishing tool. I personally would tend to use my turboplane for rapid shaping, and then I would go to this for doing detail work. But I have used it for doing complete projects as well, because you can remove a fair amount of wood with this as well. I'll demonstrate. What I notice using this tool is that when I go in this direction, it's really good for doing a fine cut. And if I want a more aggressive cut, I move in the other direction. It's quite noticeable, the difference of aggression if you go forwards, but always, because of the negative angle, it's always resisting, so you don't get any grabbing, any biting at all. So it's a very, very smooth tool to use. So just to explain the differences between these blades, this of course is our most popular, the turboplane. Great for doing freehand shaping. It's got a benign edge on the edge, so you can run up against guides and things, and so you can do beautiful freehand shaping. And then there's the industrial blade, which you can plunge into the wood, cuts on the edge, and it does quite a nice smooth job as well, but a much narrower profile. This particular blade is much wider. You can see it's got a circular carbide tooth on it. They're all negative angles. You can use it on a flat like this, and you can use it vertical. In fact, in the vertical position, it's really great for doing spoons and things like that. Absolutely perfect. It's like it's been machined. And the blade works equally well in either direction. So, and being a wide profile and being negative, it gets a beautiful finish. Please have a look at that. So this blade can be done, used for doing spoons and internal shapes, external shapes. Fine shaping is where I would use it. So remember, with this tool, if it does get a bit blunt, you can loosen the tooth off and rotate it. The very, very hard carbide lasts a long time. We haven't had to rotate any yet in our testing. However, one potential issue is a build-up of resin on the outside of the blade, because it's designed to ride on that so that the cutters do not take more than a certain thickness of cutting. And if you get resin building up, if you're cutting a particularly resinous wood like pine or something, you might need to clean the resin off every now and then, just so that to make sure that the cutter's getting good purchase on the wood. One thing I should mention with this tool is, because it's on a negative angle, and if you leave it in the wrong or in one position for a little bit too long, you can get a little bit of burning. I'll just make it burn a little bit here, and then I'll just demonstrate just with the slightest cut. You can just quickly remove that if you get any burning appearing. So I'll put it in, I'll cut in a bit deep, and then I'll leave it to make a burning mark. So if I hold it too long in a position, especially with the grain coming down like this, you can get it to burn, right? And if that happens, you just simply do a light cut to remove it, right? So I think this blade will be great for doing spoons and anything where you require a bit of fine shaping. You can go down to doing really quite fine detail before you do sanding. When I was doing spoons with it, I found I didn't have to sand the internal part of the spoon at all. And chair seats, this will be marvellous for doing chair seats, because you get a very good finish. The profile is perfect for doing nice big wide curves like that. And you'll get it down to very, very fine shape with very little sanding. Because of the way this cuts, very little bit of sanding to finish it off. And instrument makers are finding this very, very useful already. I've placed this with some instrument makers, and they can use it for the doing the near the base of the neck of a guitar and up at the head. They were doing all that kind of shaping. One guy is using it to plane and do arch tops. So you can do some very fine detail with this particular tool. This is probably a great tool for beginners because it's much more forgiving. It's not as aggressive as some of our other tools. However, I prefer to use it more as a fine finishing tool where I want to do some really gentle and accurate work and not have to spend so much time sanding.